load on it, so let's see. Yep, it did it. You can see it pulled the battery just a surge at 9 volts, but the inverter kicked on. This thing's starting to impress me. All right, we got an inverter to review. Inverter. Let's see if Rusty Watt wants to participate in the review. Looks like it. This is a 12 volt 110 inverter. It's the 3600 watt version. So let's see what we got in here. This is a really sharp knife. There was only one dent in the box here. Let's hope it didn't mess up anything. Nope. So far, that's a good sign. This is the 3600 watt version. So it comes with the very short, which makes sense because this thing's going to be pulling lots of current. So they don't want you to have long cables. Let's see how long these things are. They don't want you to have too long of a cable, I'm assuming. These are about, what is that? A little over a foot. So we got maybe 17 inches, something like that. That'll work just fine for test. All right, so let's get this puppy out of here. It supposedly came with a screen too. Yep, there's our screen. That's a good thing. It's got extra fuses. And I picked this inverter for a couple of reasons. Because I have a Xantrex that kind of looks like this as far as the shape. And the main reason is it's got a GFI on the front. So when you have an inverter, most of the time, with a GFI outlet on the front, most of the time you can hook those into your breaker panel in your house if you know what you're doing, you're an electrician, and there's not a hot neutral. So this one, I'm assuming, because it's got a standard looking GFI, that there's no hot neutral in this thing. So it's got some decent weight. I'll be really interested to see if it'll actually do 3600 watts. I was thinking it was going to be a lot heavier. I might take this thing apart too. Let's get it hooked up and see if she's putting out any power before we go any further. This is something I like to do. I take an incandescent light bulb. LED will not work for this. And I clamp onto my positive. This is coming from the battery. And then I'm going to hit it to the negative just to make sure the light bulb works. Yep, our light bulb's working. So now I'm going to hook it to the inverter positive. So we're going to charge the caps up. There we go. That was pretty good charge. Looks like the inverter's on. So I need to turn the inverter off. There we go. Inverter's off. So now our caps are charged up. So now I'm just going to put this on there. We'll pull that off. No sparks. Caps are charged. So we'll put our washers on there. Let's turn her on with full current for the first time. And we're going to see if it's a hot neutral or not. I don't know if you can see that, but what's really cool about this inverter, it has a display, a separate display that we're going to hook up in a little bit. But it shows it's putting out 121 volts, 61 hertz. It was 60 a second ago. And it's showing the battery voltage is 14.7. So let's see if we got hot neutral or not here. It looks like we might have a hot neutral. Yeah. So let's hook up something to it and see what she does. And it also has a watt meter. So I know the air bed yesterday, let's air it up and deflate it. It was running about 70 something watts. So we're going to see how well this watt meter works. Let's hook up the display real quick. So it comes with a USB cable. Pretty sure this is A to A. And right here on the front of the inverter, it has a little cell phone with a mark through it, so you don't plug your cell phone into that. This is just for the meter, so it's not a charging port, is what they're telling you. So let's plug into our USB port there. Got a voltage meter. It's showing the exact same voltage, 14.6, 14. I'm going to turn the inverter off here and see if we can turn the inverter on here. Yep, okay, that's cool. So with the switch off, you can turn the inverter on and off from the meter. All right. We'll put that off to the side here. What I'm going to test for now is just to see how accurate the watt meter is. We're already showing 12 watts. We're going to compare that to, let's just say that this is pulling 12 watts, which I don't think it would be, but it could be. I'll have to test that out with something else later. So we're going to deflate our air mattress. This is a twin air mattress. So we're going to plug this in. We're going to deflate it all the way, and we're going to see how many watts we're pulling. So it's right on the money because it's showing 72 watts. Let's see what this shows. Our kilowatts showing about 65. Yeah, so that's pretty close because we're already showing the 12 watts with this. So we're going to deflate it all the way. There we go. We got all the air sucked out. So we're showing less wattage now because there's no fan blades loaded. So our battery's going to slowly come back up. Let's check a heavy load like a hairdryer now. And then we'll get back to the, let's see if it can handle a hairdryer. All right, now we're going to see if it's accurate. So we're going to turn it on low with just the fan. So we got 13.2 here on the inverter and 13.2 on our fluke. Now I'm going to let the heat go. It's going to pull about 700 or so watts. And we're dropping down to 10.7, 10.2, 10.3. Let's see what 9 point something, 10. We're pulling about 560 something watts. All right, the inverter just shut off. It said, okay, I'm protecting your battery. So that worked. So let's see what voltage it shuts off at here. We're going to let that do that again. We're at 10 volts. The inverter thinks it's 9 volts. So it shuts off around 9 point something volts. So that's working. So that portion works. And like I said, we got a long run from the battery. And I need to hook this up directly to the battery in part 2 of this review. Power. So we're going to hit ground and see if this thing has a hot neutral. Yep, looks like it does. Each leg has about 60 volts on it. So yep, it's got a hot neutral. So far, this is a pretty decent inverter. The only thing I see is a con is it's got a hot neutral. So, you know, you couldn't hook this into your breaker panel if you're a do-it-yourselfer. So that's kind of a mark against it. But if you have it in your truck, it's just fine for normal use. Like I said, I only got this for running stuff like jigsaws, table saws. I'm going to hook it straight to the battery on a sunny day and see if it'll run my table saw and my air compressor to see if it's really capable of doing 3600 watts. And that will definitely be part 2. And as far as how this display works, you turn the inverter off and it enables the on and off switch on this thing. If you have the inverter switch turned on, that bypasses the on and off switch and this just stays working as a display. Another bonus about this inverter is the fan's not running right now. So the fan is not kicking on until it gets warm, and it's pretty cold outside right now. So when we do a load test on this thing, we'll see what it takes to kick the fan on.
The next day.
775, and it's actually showing 61 hertz. So yeah, it's actually showing that the hertz is high, and it's at 12.1 volts right now doing this. So it's pulling the system down pretty good. Our coffee is done. So let's see what we got here. Other coffee makers pull upwards to 800 and 750 watts. I like this one. It makes good hot, good coffee, good dark coffee, and the heat is perfect. The next test is going to see if it can run the water well. So there is some startup surge here. So we're going to put it on amps right there. And I'm going to see if I can plug this in. This cord goes to the well. The well runs on airlift. Here, I'll just turn off the power strip. Plug that in. And we're going to see our startup amps. Alright, startup amps is not bad. Pulling about 3 amps. 300 and the watts is going to go up as the pressure goes up in the well. My other inverters, it only takes around 30 amps to run the well. So we're going to see the pressure level off. We'll let the pressure level off and then we'll check the amps on the battery. Alright, so the inverter is showing on the screen in the front of it, showing 503 watts. And let's see what we're really getting. The kilowatt is showing 348, which is across the board accurate on all the measurements I've taken with all my other measuring tools. So 345 to 350 is about what we're really running. So let's see how many amps we're pulling. It usually takes about 30 to 33 amps to run the well on the other inverters. So we're doing 31 right there, which that's pretty close. So now we're going to challenge this thing. We're going to hook the hairdryer up to it and see how much power, if it can handle the hairdryer, which is about 1700 watts, and the well at the same time. All right, so that's the compressor for the airlift system. So this is running the water well right now. So now let's turn the hairdryer on low. Now we're pulling 1000 watts. So let's go, we're just going to leave that on and set that right there. And we're going to go check the amps to see what that's pulling. So the front says we're pulling 1370. The battery voltage is showing 11.2. And we're pulling 119 amps. 119 amps. That it's strong enough. This will probably turn it off. We'll either have a low voltage situation. There's high. We're pulling, yeah, so this thing is blinking out. That's well over 1800 watts. All right, the inverter's starting to chirp now. Let's see if it's low voltage. It's pulling 182 amps, 182. We're getting into the low voltage range right here. So yeah, we don't have enough amps on our battery bank to do this. So the battery's at 10.3. It's still running at 107 volts. It's claiming to be 2000 watts. So it's got some power to it. Now we're back at 36 amps. Let's re-zero our stuff out here and see what we got. We're at 32 amps, 34, 35. It's because the battery voltage is lower now because we're at 12.4. So there's our inefficiency. So as the battery voltage comes back up, we should be drawing less amps. Yeah, see, it's slowly coming down on the amp draw a little bit. So, yeah, it's got a little bit more power than I thought it would have. Not very efficient, but at 12 volts, really nothing is. So we're going to let the batteries kind of come back up a little bit. But so far, I am kind of impressed with it. I didn't think it would do that. So it'll run a hairdryer and the water well at the same time, which means it'll run any of my power tools. If you give it enough power, it's going to be hungry for amps.
2,000 years
We're going to do more load testing on this thing. I got it hooked up, and yes, 2,000 years later, finally had time to do this. So I got my 4 deep cycle AGM batteries here on my bigger solar setup with the charge controllers. We should have enough amps now to challenge this thing. We're going to see if it will run my antique DeVilbiss air compressor. And that's a pretty big motor to start. So if it can run that, then that's a good thing. So I'm going to put the camera right here. And I'm going to flip the switch. I'm going to make sure we're in focus. I'm going to flip the switch. Here we go. Well, that's a good sign. It's pulling down the battery pretty hard. 12.2, 12, 11, 12. I'm going to cut off my other loads and we're going to do this again. All right, now we're going to have the air compressor, the hair dryer on low, and the shop vac. We're going to see if it'll start it. Now this air compressor is going to be starting up under load, so it'll be interesting to see if this thing can even do that. I don't even think it's going to be able to, because that's going to be a heavy load on it, so let's see. Yep, it did it. You can see it pulled the battery just a surge at 9 volts, but the inverter kicked on. This thing's starting to impress me. All right. Now we're going to, let's see, let's kick on the hair dryer in the shop vac. So let's turn on the hair dryer on low. That's low. We're going to move this away. We're going to put the hair dryer on the ground. So that's high. That's the heat's on and the hair dryer's on low. That's keeping my feet warm. That's actually pretty nice. So we're pulling 123 amps right now from our battery bank. So the cable's not warm, obviously. Just turn this on. 125 amps. And our battery bank is at 12.2 volts. All right, so now we're going to turn on the shop vac. This could do it. It stayed on. It says it's at 3,000 watts. Now we're pulling 180. Showed 180 amps. We're going to run it until the compressor cycles. Our battery bank is at 11.6. So it's showing it's pulling about 2,900 watts. I want to hear this fan kick on back here. So far this fan has not turned on. So I'm going to run it like this for a while. We're pulling about 182 amps from our battery bank here. There we go. All right, did you hear that surge? All right, so the inverter kind of complained about that. Yeah, it's kind of complaining, but it's still working. So I guess it's the low voltage that it complained about. I'm going to turn off the hair dryer for a second. Yeah, it was the low voltage that it's complaining about. So I'm going to turn off the compressor. The fan still hasn't kicked on. We're going to let the battery kind of get back up to 14 something volts. Give my battery a rest. And then we're going to test it with the hair dryer on high. So far it hasn't shut off. Now we're going to measure the voltage drop from the battery to the inverter. So the inverter is showing 14.4 volts. My fluke is showing 14.4. This fluke's showing 14.4. So we're going to kick on the hair dryer and see what kind of voltage drop we're getting. So this is going to give our measurement of voltage, and then these will tell us the battery voltage. So the flukes are going to be the battery voltage, and then we're going to go off the voltage here on the front of the inverter, because that's accurate as well. So here we go. Let's turn on the hair dryer on low and see what kind of voltage drop we're getting. So the inverter is showing 13.2, 13, 12.9, 13, 12.9, and the battery bank is showing 12.9, 13.1. It's kind of fluctuating back and forth, but yeah, 12.9, 12.9. Now we're going to put it on high. We're pulling 32 amps to run the hair dryer. It's 600 something watts. So we're going to put it on high. We're going to see some major voltage drop. So now we're down to 11.9 volts. And here's where we're showing the voltage differential here now. The battery bank is still at 12.2, but we're only getting 11.9 into our inverter. So that's a case where our cables are not big enough. I didn't find anything about the two USB the outputs here, but the this middle one says it's this middle switch here. This is your backlight. So this one on the left is your backlight. And the one in the middle claims it's lead acid or lithium iron phosphate, which really doesn't mean anything. That's a wasted switch. So that's, I don't understand why they put that in there. This is not a charger. This is a inverter. So that's kind of a pointless switch. And I understand the on and off. That's perfect. So I'm going to just plug this Wise camera into this USB port here on one of the outputs here. And we're going to see if these things have power and see what happens with our display. So we're just going to plug into there and see what happens here. So I guess this is to charge your phone, but they don't say anything about it. There we go. Yep, the camera's booting. Yep. So I guess these are for phone chargers. Yep, so the camera's on now. So yeah, there's your input for your remote screen, and then your output for charging your phone. And I don't know what it's rated at as far as how many amps. Is it 1 amp? Is it 2.4 or whatever? It doesn't say anywhere in the specs. Another cool thing is this display. It's got holes in the back, so you can mount this thing flush somewhere. You just pop these little deals out here, and you can mount your screen remotely. But if you did that, then you wouldn't be able to, so you'd probably want to have this thing spaced off of a wall somewhere so you can get to your USB cables or run USB extension cables for your charging ports, and you can get those as well. So you could get a couple of USB extension cables, and then you could flush mount this thing somewhere. But yeah, that would be tricky. You'd have to cut it out right there and plug that in. So let's do some pros and cons on this inverter. We're going to do one more load test. This is probably somebody that would buy this inverter would be somebody working at a job site or a contractor. This is what it would probably be the best for. So we're going to do a real world test. So somebody's running a Sawzall, you got somebody running a jigsaw, and then somebody's vacuuming up the mess. And sometimes you're running a shop vac while you're cutting to keep the dust down, depending on where you're working. So I'm going to see if it'll start all these at the same time. And the battery is being challenged because I have the house running on this battery bank as well. So I just turned that back on. So the battery's a little bit low as well, and it's kind of cloudy. So we're going to flip the switch and do one more load test and see if it can start up all these at the same time. So we're at the job site. Let's go. Let's do this. There we go. So our Sawzall is trying to cut into the jigsaw here. Let's move that out of the way. We'll do it one more time. That was loud. All right, we're going to hit the switch one more time. Yep. And boy, that is loud. So there we go. That's more of a practical use for this thing. That's a real world use case for something like this. And now let's get to the pros and cons. All right, pros and cons on the VEVOR inverter. This is the 3600 watt. Let's start off with the cons. The cons. The display, they should have just, this is what I'd like to see. Just take this display and make that exact same as your remote display. So that way they're both the same, because I would love to know the watts and the volts and everything right here on this display, just like that. So that's something I would like to see in the next version of this. The second con is the fact that it's got a hot neutral. So I really don't care for inverters that have hot neutrals. Most of my inverters are all just like your grid power. You got your neutral and your ground, and then your hot. So it's got a hot neutral. If that's an issue for you, this thing has a hot neutral. And another con is if you're really going to pull the power that this thing's rated at, these cables are a little bit finicky, a little bit small for that, because I'm getting some voltage drop. And see, this is what it shipped with, a really short cable. And really, they should have 2 terminals. If you're going to ship it with cables this small, you should have at least 2 terminals to be able to run this thing at 3600 watts, because this thing was hungry for amps. You saw it was pulling 182 amps, and we were getting voltage drop just from this short distance. So those are the 3 cons. The display is not really a big deal. The instructions, that could be another con as far as explaining about the output of the display, but there was nothing about that. The rated surge on this thing, on this model, was 6,000 watts. I was not able to test that. We definitely challenged it up to 3,000 watts, a little bit over for sure, but then my battery bank wasn't strong enough to go past that. It started pulling it down pretty good. So yeah, I would say if you're going to get this inverter, it's affordable. This thing is just a little bit over 200 bucks. I saw it on Walmart's website. I saw it on Home Depot's website. And for the price, I think it's a good inverter. Another pro is the size. It's pretty small. It's not too heavy. I like the fact that the fan is not running right now, and it took me forever to get the fan to start going, which means it's not running really hot. And the fan, it turned on, and then when it was cooling off, the fan slowed down. So that was cool that it's got a variable speed fan. So that's a big plus. I like the fact that the terminals are separated here as well, and you don't have them right next to each other, shorting each other out. So that's also a pro. It's got the mounting slots here. That's also a pro. So you can mount it somewhere. The USB port, I'm still up in the air on that one. It's kind of 50-50. They should have had a charging port here as well, but I guess that would have been confusing. Or a different type of cable, like use a Cat 5 cable. If I was doing this, I would use a Cat 5 cable that hooked into the display, because that's a network cable, real common, and then use the USB, put the USB chargers on the front of the inverter. You could also have USB outputs on your display if you like, but I would put it on the front of the display. So if I was redesigning this inverter, I would have one Cat 5 cable here, port, and then I would have the USB, and then that way you could have the USB charging port on front of your display here, and then your Cat 5 cable would plug into the back. But it does have a backlight, that's a pro, and you can turn the inverter on and off from the display. That's also a thumbs up. So overall, I give this inverter a thumbs up. I haven't had a long time to test it as far as see how long it's going to last. I'm probably going to keep this inverter. I did pay for this with my own money, and I'm going to keep it, and I'm going to put it to work and see how long it lasts. So that's going to be it for this review. I'll do a part 2 to this review. When I test this thing, I'm going to give it a month or two, and then I'll give you an update on the inverter for sure. I'm going to be reviewing more stuff, inverters, solar charge controllers, cameras, solar stuff, solar panels. There's going to be a lot of reviewing I need to do on Rusty Watt there. So stay tuned. I'm going to be doing a lot more reviews on the channel, and this was going to be the first review in the series. Another thing to look for on inverters is voltage cut in and out. This thing has a good low voltage cutout, so it'll go down to 10 volts at least, and let's look at the specs and see what that they're saying. And the high voltage is 16 volts. So the cutout voltage on this inverter is, they claim its over voltage is 16 volts, and I was seeing it chirp around 15.6, and then the low voltage shutoff is 9.5. So that's something else. If you're on a job site and you're looking to run an inverter, you want to get one that's got the highest voltage. That's why I like Samlex, because Samlex goes over 16 volts, and some of the alternators on the vehicles charge over 16 volts sometimes, depending on what kind of system you have. So that's another thing you need to look for in inverters. The cutout voltage on the high side and the low side. And this thing has a pretty good range for the price. This inverter right here is well over $700 or $800. It's a pure sine wave Samlex. This is what I recommend to a lot of people, and it's 12 volt as well. It's a 2,000 watt inverter, and it does every bit of 2,000 watts. And what I like about this too is you can direct wire into it. That is a con on this inverter. There's no way to direct wire into it. And usually they don't let you direct wire into them because it has a, if this has a hot neutral, that's probably not going to be the case. And that's probably why they don't have the direct wiring in this inverter. So that's another con. But this is more of a job site inverter that you'd have on your truck. That's what I would recommend this for. And I don't think I'm going to take it apart right now. I'll take it apart probably in part 2. And like I said, I want to put this thing in, I want to get it to do some work every day and see how long it's going to last. So that's going to wrap it up for this review. Please like, share, subscribe. That really does help the algorithm. I'm doing my best to grow the channel. And we'll do this again tomorrow. All right, so this is this little $17 really cool little amp I got.